Tonight we are doing the top 3 cartoons of the 1990s, and as you can see, I'm wearing my Mario Kart since '92 shirt. You gotta represent some Mario, uh, and it's gonna be a fun time because I'm a child of the '80s. I remember some of the '90s cartoons, but I was getting a little old. But our guest tonight said we got to do '90s, so he's like a brother from times of another to me. So Blake, we got to do '90s. Blake Scott Ball is on here, ladies and gentlemen. Blake, how are you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Man, I'm
Glad to
looking
be
forward to
back.
this. It's good to have you back, man. It's been what, about a year, maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
We did Twitch last time,
That's right.
and
I know.
now we're on here doing our thing. And you were one of the guys when I was listing out that we needed to be doing top 3 lists and such. I was like, I need to have Blake on because we already talked about like comics and stuff like that, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
we should do something on cartoons because that obviously influenced how we look at things, right?
Oh, absolutely. Cartoons were huge for me as a kid. I originally wrote about Charlie Brown and
Mhm.
Peanuts comic strip, and people ask me a lot of were you a big fan? And I'm like, if I was a big fan of anything growing up as a kid, it was cartoons, animation. That's where I learned a lot about the world of comic strips, comic books. Like a lot of what I knew, my first exposure was TV cartoons.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I was born a few years before Blake. And I remember a lot of the late '70s cartoons. And we were talking about that before we came live, right, Blake? Where uh
Yeah.
in our childhoods, we didn't realize it, but we were watching the
Yeah.
reruns from like 5 years
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, as I started trying to make my list for the night because John had asked whether I wanted to do 80s cartoons or 90s cartoons. I was like, oh, I'm probably only going to be able to remember watching the 90s cartoons. And so then I started making my list, and I'm going, oh, that's an 80s cartoon. That's an 80s cartoon. I had no idea. But they were still running on TV, and they were new to me. So
Mhm.
it felt fresh.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when you're a kid, you don't know.
Yeah.
It's not until
Yeah. Yeah.
2022 we find out, wow, that was brought out in '89. That's not canon. For anyone who is new to this format of programming, this is our third one that we've done here with this. I say "our" for some reason. I always have some different people on doing this, and it's always been a lot of fun. If you remember back, oh my gosh, 15 years ago, if you're that old, or 20 years ago, VH1 had a show called The List, and it's where they brought people on. They would do a list of their top 3 like guitarists or top 3 rock
Mm,
guitarists or whatever the case may be. And believe me, we're going to do one of those as well going forward.
nice.
But I thought, we need to do something for historians to come on and talk about something that's just random, and be like, hey, let's just talk about whatever top 3 of anything, whether you study it or not. And so that's why tonight we're doing top 3 cartoons in the 1990s. Blake has that experience with comic strips and such. And I was just raised on the Muppets. So I figured, what the heck? Let's try this and see what happens. We're in the ballpark. So let's see what we can do here. And as everyone chat, as we go forward, uh, we're going to do our number 3 picks first. And then I am going to do a poll question in the chat to ask you which of these picks you like the most. And then we're going to go to round 2. And then we're going to pick our number 1 pick. And then you will be able to decide as well which list you enjoy the most. And I'm sure there's going to be some honorable mentions because we've brought more than 3 because we couldn't decide sometimes. And MP Bro is already here. Dexter's Lab has already come up into here. Killer Kane with Pinky in the Brain. That may
Oh
be on
yeah.
a list. I'm not going to say because I don't even know what Blake.
Yeah, we haven't heard each other's list yet, so
No,
I'm
no.
really excited to see what we come up with.
Yeah, and the weird part is we might break the cycle tonight. The last two that we have done, there have been no overlaps in the top
Okay.
three. So the first
Okay.
one, there were 9 separate ones. The second one, there were 6. So we could have 6 more that are different, or we might have
Okay.
some overlap. So
Okay.
we might break that cherry with Blake. Who knows? So Blake, let's roll right into it. Let's go with your
Okay.
number 3 pick, brother, and let us know why and all about it.
Okay. All right. Number 3 for me is the Tiny Toons.
Oh
Tiny
yeah,
Toons.
yes.
This was a Steven Spielberg project. Spielberg, of course, had been huge for Jaws and Close Encounters and E.T. All the Jurassic Park and all these things. Jurassic Park comes a little bit later in the '90s, but um, the Tiny Toons was really sort of meant to reintroduce Looney Tunes to a new generation. Spielberg was a huge fan of Looney Tunes growing up, and Looney Tunes had been sort of home for so many of the great both artists in animation, but also directors and producers in animation. And so Tiny Toons was kind of a new cast of kind of kid characters. There was Buster Rabbit and Babs, and there was Plucky Duck, and and all these great characters. And the older Looney Tunes characters would make appearances as well. It was kind of like they were going to school and learning from the older characters. Well, of course, I loved all the original Looney Tunes reruns growing up. I learned so much classical music from that, and all kinds of literature references and even history from some of these things. And so when Tiny Toons came about, I was all in from day one. Loved it, and it just supremely well done. And as I'll probably talk about in a minute, Tiny Toons also kind of creates the animation studio that would go on to make some of the great cartoons of the '90s. So in a lot of ways, some of the stuff that is like essential viewing of '90s cartoons doesn't happen without Tiny Toons happening. So Tiny Toons, number 3.
Wow. So you're starting with the foundational
Yeah.
aspect of it. That's interesting. I didn't know that about the studio.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was really big. So I'll come back to that later. Yeah.
And I didn't know that about Spielberg.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, already learning something on the program tonight. we just got here. So my number 3, and some people are going to be like, "Really, this is your number 3?" But my number 3 for 1990s cartoons is one that now here's the thing, everybody. Okay, by like the early to mid 1990s, I'm already of the age where I'm going into sitcoms because I'm going to like 12, 13, 14, 15 years old by the mid 90s. I'm born in 80. So I have to think of this in a certain way of pop culture and impact on pop culture from that viewpoint. This may not be a cartoon that I could sit and watch like all the episodes, but some of them I can. And number 3 is one of those where I cannot sit and watch all the episodes. But from a cultural standpoint, this one impacted my generation, and at times it spoke for my generation. I kind of hate to say that, but my number 3 pick is Beavis and Butthead. And it's because of it's that crude Gen X, late Gen X. I'm a late Gen Xer. Like some people say I'm not. because 80s like on that kind of like spectrum of are you Gen X or not? But this is a Gen X style poke in the eye kind of thing. And you know, two heavy metal dudes sitting around on the couch and picking on people and doing stupid stuff because they're bored. And it's like, yeah, this is what we did before. This is what we did before the internet. You know, Mike Judge was the creator. Actually, during the this is a cool little tidbit. During the 1993 U.S. Senate hearing on violence in television, Senator Ernest Hollings referred to Beavis and Butthead as Buff Coat and Beaver, which I thought was amazing. He couldn't even get the name right, and he's putting it down. The duo was named after two real people. While going to college, Mike Judge, the creator, lived next door to a destructive, unsupervised 12-year-old who called himself Iron Butt, as he claimed to feel no pain after challenging others to kick him hard in the rear end. One of this boy's friends was nicknamed Butthead by Judge and his classmates. There was another boy who lived a few blocks away named Bobby Beavis, though Judge says that he was absolutely nothing like the character aside from his laugh. So that's where they get the laugh from. And believe it or not, it debuts in 93. Yeah. It debuts in 1993. And just picture the world in 1993 and what's going on. And you know, everyone looks back at the 90s and like, wow, it was a fantastic time and everything was great. And it's like there was a lot of stuff going on that if we had Twitter back then, you know, or we had Facebook, there'd be a lot of stuff being passed around at that time too. Luckily we didn't. You know, I could just see the memes right now. But 93, when this debuts, you know, you're talking the end of the hair band era. You're talking grunge coming in, and this show was like that kind of poke in the eye of the hair bands, and because they were looking at those old videos, right? Those old music videos, and they're like, "Oh, this guy sucks," and all, you know. It just went from there. They are actually rebooting it, and it's on Paramount. Oh, wow. It's on Paramount Plus. You can find it there. Not a sponsor of tonight's programming, but you can find it on Paramount Plus.
They should be.
Yeah, one of the clips that they put out to try to plug the new Beavis and Butthead stuff, they were actually reacting to TikToks instead of music videos. So they're making it more timely with that kind of stuff. So my number 3 pick is Beavis and Butthead. So,
you know, when I think back on that show, which, you know, we're talking, I had kids at school that were big into Beavis and Butthead. Yeah. My parents were super conservative, evangelical. Like we're not touching Beavis and Butthead. But when I think back to Beavis and Butthead in that time, I definitely connect it because it's running on MTV. And it is absolutely connected with that turn to grunge. So I think Beavis and Butthead, and I'm thinking about the days of Nirvana and Pearl Jam and you know, Soundgarden or whoever, you know, like, you know.
Yeah. I was not allowed to watch any MTV.
Same.
I just wasn't. My parents, my mother's like, no, absolutely not. I wasn't allowed to listen to like any really heavy metal kind of stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, my first album I ever bought as a kid with my lawn mowing money was a cassette, and it was Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. But then my mom's like, well, you're not listening to this stuff because we had that kind of Manson era stuff coming in in the later 90s. And she's like, I'm a 16-year-old kid. And she's like, you're not listening to that. So the first time I went to college, I was like, you're not controlling what I'm listening to now. And I was buying CD after CD because you didn't have Spotify. So, and
yeah.
that's the Beavis and Butthead kind of influence too. I wasn't allowed to watch it. It was kind of taboo, but I knew a lot of my peers were watching it, and I heard the laughs at the lunch table, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, and it really was sort of it it was one of those things that transcended enough that it was, even if you weren't watching, it was conversation among the kids at school, and
Mhm.
it was conversation among many adults and adults on TV talking about their concern about, you know, what's going on with this with the youth of the 90s, that
Right,
this is their entertainment,
right, and
yeah.
that it goes back to that Senate hearing
Yeah.
on violence in television. That's probably about the same time as that one where they were talking about violence in music.
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
have to look, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's in that era, let's say,
Right. Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we got the
Absolutely.
little disclaimer tags,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and then we're all
And then of course all that's going with the launch of the PlayStation in the mid 90s, all of
like,
that's going to get transferred onto video games,
yeah,
right? And then video games, which are going to blend the animation and the heavy music, and and adult themes, all these kind of things. That's going to, it's just sort of the extended moral panics of the
yeah,
80s. You know?
yeah, and I think someone posted, oh my gosh, I don't think it was a TikTok. It might have been something else, like a Instagram reel or something. They posted a video of the early days of making Grand Theft Auto, and that's like 90s. That's late
Yeah.
90s.
Yep.
So there's
Yep.
something else coming out because we're talking about the big 3. We're talking about violence in television, we're talking about violence in music, and we're talking about violence in video games.
Yeah.
And it's still a conversation that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that is being had. So yeah, Barbara in the chat, welcome in. I was just remembering that crap with Tipper Gore and the music. Yeah, that
Yes.
she made sure those stickers on there, and we made sure to buy those records because it's like I want that one.
It was an unintentional endorsement.
It was. It's like government endorsed, you know. Yeah, or actually, the government doesn't endorse, and then you want it
Yeah.
because you're like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Huh. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
Well,
era of Rage Against the Machine, and all this
uh,
stuff
uh,
is popping
uh-huh.
up.
Uh-huh. Something, a show kind of along, um, well, there was so the 90s saw, on the one hand, you've got a lot of like mainstream comics making their way, in various forms into, Marvel's doing a lot of stuff, DC's doing a lot of stuff in the 90s.
Mhm.
Um, but you're also seeing a lot of the art and style and influence really of the 60s and 70s counterculture make their way into the mainstream. So
Mm,
things like Ren and Stimpy,
yeah,
that really
yeah.
honed in, like focused in on the grotesque. It's
Mhm.
almost like a R. Crumb kind of approach.
Right.
Just really like kind of in your face, and it's trying to gross you out, right? With
Yeah.
some of the imagery and angles and things,
Yeah.
and so there was that whole thing going on in the 90s as well, and it's really a reaction, I think, to some of the some of the earlier animations that had really focused on a more traditional approach of like, aesthetic appeal, like, you wanted things to be aesthetically pleasing,
Mhm.
cartoony, you
Mhm.
know and they sort of took it and it went a whole a whole different direction with it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I remember, when I was growing up in the '80s,
Mhm.
you were still watching stuff like G.I. Joe and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
was more, quote, "traditional
Yeah.
American values" kind of thing, And then when you get into the 90s and you get the grunge stuff starting and you get the counterculture coming of age, being the CEOs and being the people with the money, they're funding these projects where it's like, we're just going to slap that across the face and be like, no, you know, it's not all apple pie, you know?
Yeah,
I can totally see that. Everyone, I put the poll question in there. I'll give you another minute with that. We got 2 votes. We have 5 people in here, which is well, we have 4 people in here now. Apparently one person doesn't want to vote. It is very American of us that 4 people are in here and only 2 voted. So we're running at 50% registered vote. Give me another vote and then we'll call it. And we'll move on to the next one. We put it up 5 minutes ago. But yeah, the 90s were a very interesting time. You know, I mean, I remember the Berlin Wall coming down in 89 and it was like, okay, I was old enough to remember that. And you think you're going into a new era and you think it's going to be like even more pie in the sky, it's all over. And then it was like, it got dark.
Yeah.
Like, whoa. Yeah.
Well, and that's like a lot of the a lot of the youth culture especially like the teen youth culture of the 90s was really discontented. You know, like really you know, felt like kind of promised a lot, and what the world felt like was kind of really vanilla, really bland, really you know, kind of a veneer, you know, like oh well, yeah, we have, you know, we have nice standard of living, and we have, you know, we got air conditioning, we got color TVs, and we got, you know, but like there, you know, there was this sort of existential question in the youth culture of like, what's the point? What are we here for? Like, you know, and that, I think that's how, you know, Nirvana's Teen Spirit became such an anthem, because it's like, you know, it's totally satirizing the way that it felt like adults were treating the youth of the time, you know, just like fetus mindless entertainment, and, you know, will grow up to be well-adjusted citizens.
As adjusted as we're gonna be. It's the whole thing. All right, everybody, we're going on to round 2. Apparently, I won that round, but I'm the host. I'm the host.
Okay.
It feels rigged. It feels rigged. Well, when I win. But we'll see what happens, because we're not near done. That's just number 3. So thank you, everybody who voted. Please vote early and vote often when we do this. Blake, let's go into number 2 position here. What you got?
Okay, number 2. Well, there's my number 1 was set from the get-go. So there was no debate on number 1. Number 2 was a really tough one. There's so many I could put in number 2. The one that I went with is a show from Nickelodeon. I love it because this show was it's really good-hearted. It's about kind of life as a teenager and trying to navigate sort of friendship and kind of your nemesis and love and your parents as you're getting older and a little more independent and things like that, and just always did it in really creative and good-hearted ways. So my number 2 is the show Doug.
I thought that's where you were going.
Yeah. I love Doug and Pork Chop. In a lot of ways, it's kind of a growing, kind of the next step sort of Peanuts. You know, it's like the kids growing up. You know, Doug is not always the most popular kid. Sometimes things go sideways on him. But I loved all of his imaginary adventures and the way they would theme episodes around these imaginings, whether it was Quell Man with his belt on his head, and I was trying to remember what the he had a secret agent, like a James Bond style character that he would play, but I can't remember his name. And his older sister Judy was like the high school drama kid, kind of.
That's right.
She was she was like a neo beatnik, in the 90s.
Yeah.
I love that show.
Doug. I figured that's the way you were going to go with that when you started introducing it with the coming of age kind of character.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know which one you're going after. I don't know if that might be. No, that didn't make my honorable mentions because I forgot about it.
Okay.
I forgot about it because I would have put it. Because a lot of people were really into Doug, and and for various reasons. So that should have made my my thing, but it didn't.
Great theme song.
Great themes. Yeah, catchy theme song. Yeah, when you grow up watching like the Muppet Show, you get the theme song thing in your head where you're like, you remember theme songs. And you hum them, and you're like, oh, it's just one of those things. But
and speaking of the Muppets, I very easily, and I almost did, I very easily could have put Muppet Babies. In that slot, because Muppet Babies, so much of what I knew as a kid about classic film, like all the way up through the 80s, came from Muppet Babies, because each one of their episodes was based around the kids sort of playing out the major themes of a movie as the sort of narrative arc for them trying to handle whatever their problem was in that episode. And so, you learn about Casablanca, and you learn about, Bridge on the River Kwai, and It's a Wonderful Life, and Star Wars. This was also, speaking of, my first Star Wars movie was Return of the Jedi. That's the only one I knew. So I'm one of those weird people that loves Ewoks, because that was my first exposure to Star Wars, and I thought it was pretty great. And I still remember the day that somebody told me that there were 2 more Star Wars movies before that one. I'm like, hold on, wait a second, there's more Star Wars? I only knew one movie. So, but that's how we experience things then, like a lot of this stuff, and stuff like Star Wars VHS. It's this really weird situation where, like, there was a whole long period of years where you couldn't buy the Star Wars VHS in stores.
Oh yeah.
Like, it had gone out of print. Gone out of print, and George Lucas didn't re-release it. Yeah. And so you could, so if you had to see it, if you hadn't seen it, you had to see it on TV. You had to record it off TV, a TV edit. And that's how I saw Return of the Jedi, So I had no idea there were other Star Wars movies.
I know. And now there's so many of them. And then like so many spin-offs of like background stories. And it's I'm not getting off subject here, but I actually want to start to read the books behind them. And I've never read one of them. And I'm like, but then you get into, what's the order I got to read these things? Because it's like, I'm going to have just a shelf of just books. And it's like, okay, it's like encyclopedias back in the day. It's like, you got to read the set. So.
I during the pandemic, I stumbled into, I'm looking at my shelf where I've started collecting, but I stumbled into reading the Star Wars extended universe, the extended universe books. So it's just, some of them are pretty good. Some of them are just like really, shoddy like fan fiction, but
Yeah.
it's just fun. It's just
Yeah.
fun. It's like it's like going in the sandbox and playing with the Star Wars toys and coming up
Right.
with a new story.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Love
just
it.
for me, it's something else to read other than my nonfiction all the time. You need that little
Yeah.
break once in a
Yeah.
while where you're
Yeah.
not frying your brain over some
Yeah.
kind of like historical narrative or something. Um,
Definitely.
but yeah. So we got Doug on. Doug has made the list. It's kind of like this is kind of like our version of NFL draft kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, what round is this person going to go in? I want to do one of those sometime. Where we
That
do
would be
an
awesome.
NFL draft style of
That would
something.
be awesome. That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
But I got to get to my number two choice here. My number two choice debuted in 1999, so we just made it. We just made it, and I wondered if it was 1999 or 2000, but it was 1999. One of my favorites. I actually almost got one of the characters tattooed on me, which we'll go over in a second because he's one of my favorite characters in animation. I'm talking about the guy. If you want, I use that term loosely. The guy who lives at 124 Conch Street, and I'm talking about SpongeBob Squarepants, is my number two choice. Like I said, debuted in 1999. The talking sea sponge himself. He does live at 124 Conch Street. If you want to send him a Christmas card, you can do that. He lives in a nice 2-story pineapple. Works at the Krusty Krab, goes to boating school, which is one of my favorite parts of the whole thing is the boating school. The show's creator is the late Steven Hillenburg. He was a marine biologist, and he pitched the show to Nickelodeon. He brought a fish tank into the boardroom at Nickelodeon and explained things that were living on the inside of the fish tank. He then placed a cartoon drawing of SpongeBob into the tank and said, "This is SpongeBob, the star of your new show." And that's how he pitched this to Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon bought into it and was like, "Okay, well,
Yeah.
But I like the fact that
And
he's
what a hit.
a marine biologist is just an awesome little thing too, where it's like, okay, this guy's cool. Nickelodeon aired an 8-hour SpongeBob marathon on December 2nd, 2018, as a tribute to Hillenburg because he passed from ALS in 2018. So 8 hours of SpongeBob, if you can handle it. Out of all the Nicktoons to air in the 1990s, this is the only one that's still in production. So this is the remaining one. The Krabby Patty was originally to be the Barnacle Burger. Mr. Krabs is actually the guy that I wanted to get tattooed on me. I wanted him to be tattooed on my leg right where my wallet sits because he loves money so much.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, he would want me to save my money instead of spending. So I wanted to get him tattooed on my leg.
He'd be grabbing at it.
Yeah, he'd be grabbing it. Yeah. My money. If you look closely, SpongeBob's co-star friend, Patrick Star, is actually very large in the first season, and he gets smaller as the seasons progress. So they gave him like a weight loss treatment, and he's now a little bit smaller than he was. SpongeBob SquarePants is also the first cartoon on Nickelodeon to have over 200 episodes.
Wow.
So it's not only the longest running and still in production, it's also the only one that's had over 200 episodes, as far as I know. And that was a figure as of, I believe, last year. And I don't think there's another one that has surpassed 200 since then. But yeah. SpongeBob is everywhere. There's a movie. I didn't see the movie, obviously. It's just not my thing. The last kind of cartoony movie I saw was the Sonic movie with Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of one of my favorite Jim Carrey roles, actually. In the Sonic movie. Well, like Tom Cruise's favorite role for me is in Tropic Thunder. Jim Carrey's favorite role for me is in a Sonic movie. So I got to throw a curveball from time to time. But SpongeBob SquarePants is my my number 2 pick.
Well,
what do you think of that one? Was that on your honorable mentions? That's all I ask. I don't need to know if it's number one, but was it on your honorable mentions?
no, it was
No,
not. It
no,
was not.
no.
I guess because it was 99.
Uh-huh.
I didn't total it. I was kind of like you. I would have placed it kind of early 2000s,
Yeah, yeah,
in my memory.
yeah.
Um, and so it was. Um, my experience with SpongeBob has been kind of spotty. I've caught episodes here and there.
Mhm.
I have younger siblings, and they kind of liked it. But yeah,
Yeah,
um,
I'm definitely a Mr.
it
Krabs guy.
yeah. There's an episode. There's an episode that I wish I've tried a couple of times searching on YouTube to find. The opening of the episode um, is Patrick and SpongeBob playing some game in the front yard
Mhm.
that involves like a field goal post, and like they're just, they're just using all these different like board games and sports terminology. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
And but it is hilarious. I mean, just the whole, they draw this whole thing out, and it's like they really know what's going on, but it makes no sense. And uh,
I love when they
but
do the reenactment of the Battle of Bikini Bottom. That's a good one. I have a couple memes of them in the trenches, and
yeah.
someone made it into First World War style. So I was like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had friends who were really big Plankton fans,
Yeah.
Squidward fans,
Oh yeah.
obviously. I was one of the only Mr. Krabs fans. Uh,
Yeah, you may be the only Mr. Krabs fans I've ever met.
yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
one of those things. You know, you go through a costly divorce, Mr. Krabs will be your best friend. I'll tell you. Just gonna put it out there. You know, uh, this is why I love top three lists. I can just say my channel, folks. I can say what I need to say here. Thank you, everybody, for voting. Really appreciate that. Blake won that round. 100%,
Hey,
100% of the vote. Wow.
man.
It's like North Korea around here. 100% of the vote is in. Thank you, everybody, for that. MP Pro has been here this whole time. Thank you. I wasn't allowed to watch SpongeBob or Beavis. Wow, that's a real interesting thing, because I can understand when someone's not allowed to watch Beavis, but not allowed to watch SpongeBob. That's really interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. We SpongeBob. I can just hear my mother. Like, my mother had categories for kind of unofficial categories for TV shows,
Mm-hmm.
and those would have kind of fallen into two different categories, neither one of which she liked. The Beavis and Butthead would be like, just like too mature, right? The way
Right.
the way they're talking, the way they're at, that's not, too mature. You don't The Simpsons a lot of times fell in that category. You
Yeah,
know,
I was the same way.
yeah. So I wasn't allowed to watch those. Um, SpongeBob, stuff like SpongeBob, and maybe like Ren and Stimpy and some of that stuff was kind of like, she saw those as like stupid humor, and
Right.
she thought, are kind of mindless, and she didn't like that either. Yeah, that's a waste of your time. You don't need to be watching those. Those are just
Yeah.
dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in an extended family household, and
Yeah.
I had my mother, and then my stepfather came along, but we still live with my mother's parents. And
Mhm.
so when I got to a certain age, I think it was okay. It's time for you to think about other things than cartoons. And then I went way too mature, and like my childhood just like stopped as far as I was
Yeah.
concerned with programming, because then it was like my grandfather's like, here, we're gonna watch like Law and Order, and we're gonna watch like Matlock, and I'm like, I'm a 14-year-old kid, and I'm like, what do you mean? Who am I going to talk to at the lunch table about this? I mean, it's no
Did you
wonder I
see
was picked
did,
on.
did did you see the latest Murder She Wrote?
Right. The Golden Girls. Yes. Yes. Yeah, like I'm gonna get a date talking about the Golden Girls at, for prom. This is great. It's no wonder I drank so heavily when I was older, But yeah, there was this kind of like cutoff where it's like, okay, you're like 13, 14, you're a teenager now. You
Yeah,
shouldn't be
yeah.
worried about, what's going on in animation. You should be thinking about adulthood. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
that's not.
Yeah.
But that's the way that's the way you grow up, just off of like the Appalachian mountain range.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, we were growing up by then on the farm. You're gonna grow up now. And
Well, and I think even more generally in culture, there was, I talk to people. I'm working on a new book about Batman now,
Mhm.
and so a lot of folks that I talk to, especially in the publishing world, they're like, "Oh, you must have like collected all the Batman stuff growing up, right? You probably have a big comic book collection and stuff like that." And really, honestly, no. Like I had some stuff kind of when I was real young, that just here and there. Like my family, I talked my mother. I didn't even know there was a comic book store in my town, but until like a friend's birthday party in junior high school. And so I found out about this. I found out where it was. I talked my mom into taking me to it one day. I went in exactly one time, and my mother was freaked out by the adult men in the comic book store.
Yep.
She's like, "That place is weird. We're not going back there."
Yep.
So my, when I got a hold of a comic book, it would be a random comic book here or there that just happened to be like in a grocery store or
Mhm.
in a convenience store, or whatever. They just have a few on the rack, and they'd just be random. And I might talk mom into buying me one.
Right.
Um, and but I was the same way. Like I went through, you know, um, there was even kind of this late childhood phase where I still loved action figures. I still loved cartoons. I
Mhm.
still loved drawing and things like that. But increasingly, like I kept it secret at home because I didn't want the other kids at school to know that I still like this stuff.
Right.
And then and then I literally boxed it all up and put it away. And it wasn't until I got into college and started meeting some English professors in college who studied pop culture stuff and going, "Oh wait, there's
Mhm.
like serious smart people that study this stuff." And so I start, like I I'm like, "Okay." So I kind of start digging back into comics a little bit, and one thing leads to another, and here I am today. Um but yeah, there definitely was a span of time where I kind of swore off
Yeah.
kid stuff,
Yeah.
because there's, action figures, cartoons, video games, like, just put it all away. And, I'm going to be serious and, and all these kind of things. And, here I am all these years later and living a happier life,
Yeah.
enjoying what I enjoy,
Yeah. I'm getting to do what I wasn't allowed to do.
Yeah.
If I want
Yeah.
to sit down and watch a cartoon series, I can sit down and watch cartoon series.
Yeah.
The only one that was acceptable to watch was if my grandfather sat down with me and watched the old Looney Tune stuff. Because
Oh,
he grew
wow.
up around that stuff, or didn't grow up around it,
Yeah.
but that was like his thing. Like
Yep.
He loved like Foghorn Leghorn and all this other
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
we would watch that, and that was about the only time where I was allowed to sit down and watch cartoons. The rest of the time, after I reached teenage years, it was serious stuff,
Yeah.
and then I slowly, like, really, like, didn't fit in with anyone at school because it was like, "You gotta be serious now. Come on."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was interesting times. Thanks for bringing back my trauma, Blake. I really appreciate this. This is like a
What are
therapy
friends for,
session.
It's
Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted to do on my top list. Start my therapy session all over again. This is great. Uh I'm just this is what I was thinking, Blake and I together. I don't know why. We're kindred spirits in this way.
That's right.
All right. So I know we have honorable mentions for afterwards, but we got to get to our number one choice. Shorzy, thank you for being here, buddy. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for coming over from Twitch to hang out with us. I see you there in the chat. I gotta edit my banner to Blake's number one pick. All right, Blake, we are ready for your numero uno pick.
Okay. All right. This one, I just couldn't. I mean, if you asked me any day of the week, if you asked me back in the 90s, what is the greatest cartoon of the 90s, I would have had the exact same answer as I'm about to give.
Okay.
In my opinion, the greatest cartoon of the 1990s is Batman the Animated Series.
Oh, yes.
Batman the Animated Series.
Nice.
This show gets started in 1992. It was in production for the better part of 3 years. It's the brainchild of an animator named Bruce Timm and some a number of co-writers, particularly a guy by the name of Paul Dini, who ends up being an important lead writer, would go on to be involved in the show Lost and a bunch of other things. So one of the things about this show, this is Warner Brothers trying to make the most off of the Tim Burton 1989 Batman movie. So it was huge. The fact that there was a Batman live action movie was like the greatest thing I could imagine as a kid. I didn't get to see the movie. I was too young in '89 to see the movie in theaters. But Burton released in late '92, I think November, Batman Returns. This is the second movie where you get Danny DeVito as the Penguin, and Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman.
Right.
It's got Christopher Walken in it as a major kind of character, Max Schreck, and it brings back Michael Keaton as Batman. And so Batman the Animated Series kind of falls in between those two films. So it's in many ways from the music cues, the theme of the show, the aesthetics of the show, it's pulling from the universe of the Burton movies, but it really becomes its own thing. Which was a really interesting, I remember as a kid always trying to figure out when exactly Batman was living, because I knew that the Gotham City he was living in didn't look like places I knew in the 90s.
Right.
It's very Art Deco in the Burton world. And so the cars were all old, and things like that. They're driving, I don't know what kind of cars they were driving, but they all look old.
Right.
But then you've got Batman with all this like high-tech technology. And so I was always really confused about, and I think they did that on purpose. It's sort of set in its own time outside of regular time. At least then it was kind of its own universe. Batman has been becoming increasingly grounded to our world in the decades since. But Batman the Animated Series, such a huge show. Of course, rest in peace, Kevin Conroy, who was the voice actor for Batman. He was phenomenal. And just passed away in the last week or so. This is the show that introduced reintroduced the world to Mr. Freeze,
Mm,
who had been this kind of weird 1950s character,
right.
who, you know, his was kind of quirky, and his thing was he ice, you know. But in this show, the uh, Mr. Freeze is actually this scientist who has devoted his life to trying to find a cure for his wife who had a terminal illness.
Hmm.
He has frozen her in cryogenics, and he is trying everything he can to save her. That's sort of his motivation, and it really turned. And they did this with a number of characters, and it kind of turned these characters into really Shakespearean type
Yeah.
drama.
Yeah.
You know, the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent, when Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face. That is really fleshed out in the animated series. Of course, the longest lasting legacy of the animated series, Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn
That-
is created on the
yeah.
show, and
Yeah.
she, yeah,
Yep.
and so she, and of course she's been the biggest addition to the Batman universe in the last 30 years.
Hmm. MP Pro also says a lot of the episodes seem to pull from horror genre too.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. One of my other favorite episodes is an episode uh, I think it's called something like Beware the Gray Ghost. And the Gray Ghost was a TV character in Batman's universe. It was a TV show, superhero that Bruce Wayne had watched as a kid and had idolized. He was kind of like the Shadow,
Yeah.
that old pulp character.
Yeah.
And the whole show is about, um, someone is committing crimes. There's this bomber who's blowing up things in Gotham, and he's committing crimes that are reenacting an episode of that old TV show. And Bruce Wayne remembers this, and so he reaches out to the actor who had played the Gray Ghost. Of course, is retired and has been at that time. Well, the voice actor for the character in the show, they brought in Adam West.
Oh,
And so
nice.
Kevin Conroy's Batman teams up with Adam West as the Gray Ghost, and
That's
they
cool.
solve this crime. And the end of the show is sort of Bruce Wayne getting this moment to say, wow, I got to grow up and partner with my hero, right?
Mm,
And it's this really cool moment of Batman really really humanizing Bruce Wayne as somebody who he was a kid once too, before he became so hardened and focused on defeating crime.
mhm. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. When you're looking for a time to finish your book, when is that looking towards
Well,
on
it's
Batman?
yeah, it's so a lot of work is going in over the holidays. I've sort of supercharged my writing in the last couple of weeks as the
Mhm.
semester's been wrapping up. And the goal is, I would say this book's probably going to be out, will probably be like 24, early 24.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, so about another year, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's going to be really cool.
Mhm.
We're taking Batman from his origins in the Great Depression all the way up to the present.
That's cool.
Robert Pattinson. Yeah.
That's cool. We'll definitely have to do a top 3 list of, like, top 3 Batman characters.
Oh yes.
That'd be good. And pull out the ones people don't normally think about, like you said about Mr. Freeze.
Yeah.
Uh, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger comes along and
Mhm.
plays the
Uh-huh.
character, and it's like
Uh-huh.
a lot of people would never, would have known about it without the animated series,
Yep.
and then they bring his character back to life
Hmm.
in a physical sense, and it's like,
Yeah.
wow, that's really cool. So it's something that was impacted by the series that you just mentioned, you know?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. Super. Yeah. Super influential.
yeah, Yeah,
And it came.
I'm a Batman guy, so that's fine.
Yeah. Well, and it came from I mentioned this with Tiny Toons. All those guys came out of the Tiny Toons studio. These were guys that Steven Spielberg had brought together, and while they're working on Tiny Toons, they're also brainstorming other concepts and ideas. And one of the concepts that comes out of it is Batman, and of course, then that spawned. There was a Superman animated series. There was a Justice League animated series. There was Batman Beyond. There was, so many more really hit shows came out of that Batman show.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. Really good pick for number one. So as I said before, by this time period, I am grown, and I'm thinking about other stuff than this right now. However, I have to think of this list as pop culture and what has impacted pop culture, and this heavily impacts my number one pick because I'm looking at longevity. I'm looking at again what I see on T-shirts and what I see in all kinds of stuff. Apparel and accessories and all this stuff coming off of it. And that's how I built my list. And that really impacts how I built the list at the top, meaning my number one choice. So this is a show that I never got into. So I can't say this is like my number one pick. That would not be my number one pick. If I had to talk about my number one pick that I love, as far as 90s cartoons are concerned, it's got to be Family Guy. That's got to be mine. 99, it's right around that time. Again, we're going to like 99 with this stuff, but it's still, I mean, I still love the Star Wars spoof, and I'm still all about that life. MP Bro says Simpsons. No, I'm not. No, Simpsons came out in the 80s, and I thought I would just stick with like what came out in the 90s. I don't care if it went forward, obviously, because I talked about SpongeBob. But my number one pick has to be South Park. That has to be my number one pick. I've only ever watched like 3 episodes because I cannot do that kind of comedy. It's just not my thing. I'm not into it. I like things that make you think a little bit more. And because I was raised on Don Rickles, and I was raised on, if you want attitude, you go there. I was raised on Benny Hill. I was raised on that stuff. So I have to have that in my cartoons as well. That's why I like Family Guy, because sometimes they throw stuff in, you're like, ooh, that's rocking the boat, but I kind of like it. That's why I like The Simpsons. No, I'm a big Simpsons person, and once we do the top 3 of the 80s, I'm sure that's going to be in my top 3. But when we're talking 90s, and if I was trying to tell someone this is what the 90s was like, these are the 3 that I would say you go to and you look at. South Park debuted in 97. So I was in high school when it debuts, and I remember it, because the high school went nuts over this stuff. There are 4 grade schoolers from South Park, Colorado. South Park still holds the Guinness World Records for most swearing in an animated series.
I can believe that.
Yeah. The show has such a simple animation technique that it only takes 6 days to develop a show and make it. That's why when something happens in the real world, they can put something out almost immediately. It seems like they have such a good animation team, and it's so quick that they can have a turnaround in 6 days or less sometimes. So that's why you have them being like up to the minute with like, what's going on in the world, and they can spoof on it. I forget the program they use, but it's a pretty well-known cartoon making program, and I can't remember from the production standpoint. The pilot episode was actually used making paper cutouts for the characters. And a lot of people don't know that. And it was only after that they went to animation with computer. This is the first ever weekly show to get TVMA rating. due to the use of coarse language. So 1997, they get the TVMA ratings, and this is the first show to get it that's a continuous weekly show. It's the first one.
Yeah.
So it's not like Law and Order SVU or any kind of those things that went kind of dark, spin-off kind of things. It was South Park was the one that did this. The one little tidbit that I really love, and a lot of people wouldn't know this unless you're a rock fan. Okay, and I don't mean like the rock. I mean like rock music fan. Okay. One of Cartman's lesser known catchphrases is "Ha ha, charade you are," and he says it in a British accent. That's pulled from the Pink Floyd song "Pigs" from the Animals album, when they're talking about people in the White House and charade you are, and it goes on and on and on. They pull that from Pink Floyd. And me being a huge Pink Floyd fan, I really appreciate that. But again, it's one of these things that is still with us. And how many years later? 97, you're talking 25 years now, I guess, that it's been around. Yeah. People still quote from it, especially people my generation still quote from it for some unknown reason. I don't understand, but it just does. I'm not one of those. You will not hear me give like a historical tour and I'm doing some kind of a Cartman catchphrase. That's not my way of doing things. It might be a Batman catchphrase, but it won't be a Cartman catchphrase. But as far as when someone asked me what was life like in the 90s and we talk about cartoons, this is the number one choice for me. So number one being South Park. So we have Blake's picks and my picks going there across the bottom. We have done all three of these. I'll put the poll question up here momentarily so you can decide which list you like. I know there's a lot of hate right now in the chat for South Park. I'm sorry. I did not create the show. Blake's number 3, Tiny Toons. Number 2 is Doug, and number 1 is Batman the Animated Series. I feel like Blake has went a very, very southern hospitality with his kind of thing, and I went very northern rogue and raw with mine. Beavis and Butthead, SpongeBob, and South Park. We also have people in the chat with some ideas for their picks. And I would love to bring some of those in. I know, where was it at? My buddy Dan Costello is here. Has Ren and Stimpy been honorably mentioned? Ren and Stimpy made my honorable mention.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think you can't talk about 90s animation without Ren and Stimpy. No. I mean, it really made a splash. It really it was Nickelodeon's first foray in really kind of pushing the envelope of kids cartoon, of animation. It blends, like I said, so much of the kind of underground comics with an X style into mainstream animation. So you were getting mass audiences for things that previously had been, content published in 50 fanzines, distributed by hand in Greenwich or something, or Berkeley.
Yeah.
So it really kicked open the door for a lot of other opportunities.
It really did. Yeah. Everyone did put the vote up in the chat. Please let us know. Please vote early, vote often. We have 2 votes in. Please keep voting. Shorzy, number 3, Futurama, then South Park, then King of the Hill. King of the Hill was another one that got an honorable mention. I forgot Futurama.
Yeah. Futurama is a funny show, and it's one that from a production standpoint, that really, it's not the first, but they do it well, blending animation and computer generated content, and they're working together. the first place that I really saw that. I mean, if another thing we should mention talking about animation, and I feel like it's so huge, and yet somehow we kind of forget about it in conversation. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Who
Yes.
Framed Roger
Oh
Rabbit
God.
is such a technical masterpiece. I
Yep.
mean, it's just so incredible what they
Yep.
pulled off in that movie. Um, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Huge.
Yeah.
But the first place Disney started in the early '90s blending. They do it in Aladdin. They do it in Beauty and the Beast, and in many cases, you may have watched those movies when they came out and never even noticed that there are scenes where there is hand drawn art in the foreground and the background is computer generated. The
Mm,
ballroom scene
mm.
where Beauty and the Beast are dancing, the background, the room is all computer generated.
Wow.
The remember the tiger like layer that Aladdin goes into
Yep.
to find the lamp,
Yep.
computer generated. So and but they did such a I mean it was very limited. It's early '90s technology, but they did it in such a tasteful way
Mm,
that it really blended well. Um,
yeah. Yeah. I want to give a shout out here to Jason. Jason's in the chat. He actually brings up one of my favorites. If this is my
mhm.
top three favorites, this might be three or just off. It only lasts, I think, a year, right, Jason? You might know this. Darkwing Duck. I love
Dude,
Darkwing Duck. Okay,
Dude, I
it's one
had
of
it.
my
I originally,
favorites.
I told you I debated my number two a lot.
Yeah,
Look at my original
there
number
it
two.
is.
There it
Yes,
is, Darkwing Duck. I
1991.
love Darkwing Duck.
Yeah, oh yeah, I did too. I was a huge Darkwing Duck fan. Oh, huge. I
Yeah,
remember that one.
yeah.
Yeah, you
Um,
gotta go with that one. And Killer Kane uh, also brings up Animaniacs. That was another one.
yes, yes. My
Thank you,
friend
Brent.
my friend Carter is watching but hasn't been able to participate in the chat. He texted me and brought up Animaniacs and Bobby's World.
Yeah,
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 Bobby's World. That was
yeah. Bobby's World.
what's his name? The comedian Mandel,
Howie.
Howie Mandel. Yeah,
Howie
Howie
Mandel.
Mandel's show.
Yeah.
Back when Howie Mandel had hair.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Once upon a
I
time, he had
forgot.
curly, all the curly hair. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Some other ones that are that I had listed that it's kind of a carryover, and here's why: because it's made in the '90s, but it's supposed to be a character who is now retired, basically, and moved on. It's Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Oh, love it, love it.
And I loved that show, and I was a big fan of it when I was in my early 20s because I couldn't watch it when I was younger.
Uh huh.
And
Uh
I
huh.
watched it in my early 20s, and I'm like, wow, it's like, okay, he knows he's no longer the age to be a superhero, so now he's got to do a second job. And he takes a talk show over and interviews celebrities. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's fantastic. Space Ghost Coast
Yeah.
to Coast was an honorable mention of mine.
Dude, that is a fantastic show. I know it as much from the compilation albums that they would release.
Yeah.
There you could get CDs in store with different songs or sketches and things that they would do in the
Yep.
show. It was so funny. I mean, that's really foundational for what became Adult Swim. I
Yes.
mean that is a
Yeah.
precursor, I think, to Adult Swim.
I think it was
Um,
actually shown on Adult Swim when I
uh,
think it was
that,
shown like later on Adult Swim.
uh-huh,
Like they're like,
uh-huh.
oh, this is our brand. We're gonna bring this in
Yeah,
kind
yeah, yeah, yeah,
of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So good, so good. Um, okay, some honorable mentions for me. Um, in the world of superheroes, the X-Men cartoon and the Spider-Man cartoon that Marvel did. I think the X-Men cartoon was the better of the two, but they're both fantastic, and all of the storylines are based on the comics from the 60s and 70s. It was fabulous. That's where I learned my classic Marvel comics, was from those two TV shows, before I went back and read a lot of that stuff. Nicktoons, Rocko's Modern Life.
That's on mine. Yep.
Oh,
Rocko's Modern Life.
I love, one of the things I loved about Rocko's Modern Life that I was picking up on as a kid. I would love to go back and watch now as an adult, to see just how much they satirize sort of modern industrialism, like corporatism and environmental, environmental degradation, all these kind of like really serious stuff, and they would sort of play it satirically, but they were really making some statements about how absurd parts of modern life were.
That's Rocco's is on mine. One that I have three more, but I won't go through all three right away. We'll stretch this out for a couple more minutes. One of the other ones that I have on honorable mentions is Rugrats, and I remember that was huge, and it was just one of those things that had to have.
That's the original Nicktoon, as far as I'm concerned. It may be the first one that they launched, but it was a huge hit.
MP Bro, Spider-Man TS had a world of broadcasting restrictions that ruined its pacing and constantly made them change things, and yet it was still awesome. Wow. I didn't know about the broadcasting restrictions.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
No.
But yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Another one, let's see. Another one I loved was Dexter's Laboratory.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
That was a really cool show. One of the things I loved about it was one of the great, I think, Animaniacs was like this, Tiny Toons was like this. Like, they would go and explore, Doug was like this. They would explore kind of these alternate characters, so sometimes, like, I really love the episodes where, like, Dexter would put on like some big like robo mech suit and and try and solve whatever the problem was, or and he'd end up destroying everything or whatever. But yeah, that was always, I always kind of saw myself as that kid, like in the original Power Rangers. My favorite Power Ranger was Billy, because the blue Power Ranger, because he was,
I never watched it, so
yeah.
I'm going with you.
He was the nerdy one. He was the nerdy one. He was likable, but he was nerdy. He knew a lot of stuff, and sometimes if he'd get really excited about technical stuff and like totally lose his audience, and I could really relate to that. So so when there was a whole show all about the nerdy kid, I was like, Dexter's Laboratory. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. Well, see, I'm slightly older, and my thing was growing up when we get to the top 3 80s. My thing was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and mine was Donatello, because he was the guy. He was the guy.
Same.
And I'm like, no, Leonardo is not for me. Raphael is too abrasive. Michelangelo is too childish. I'm going with Donatello. And because I was the nerd, and I still am. I will gladly wear that badge. I don't care. So I totally understand that. If I would have been in like your frame of reference with those years, I'd probably been the same way. It was just I was a little bit older, and so Donatello is my guy. I do want to go back with MP Bro real quick about this Spider-Man with broadcasting restrictions. He does clarify Fox Kids had all these rules about guns in particular. That makes sense.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
now I understand.
So there's actually an episode I heard from the Batman show. Paul Dini, one of the lead writers, was talking about this in an interview where there is they couldn't show someone they couldn't show someone dying. They couldn't show they couldn't show someone being shot. They couldn't show blood. Various things like this. So Fox Kids is dominating the kid uh, uh, ratings in the first half of the 90s. And so there was actually a scene where it's this dream sequence, but in this dream sequence, Batman fails to catch Batgirl, and she falls off this building and she smashes onto the hood of the car that her dad, Commissioner Gordon, is driving in. And that, well, in the original sequence, they had it set up to where the camera's in the back seat of the car looking over Gordon's shoulder, and you see her smash on the hood of the car.
Wow.
Well, so the Fox said we can't do that. We can't show that. But what the shot that they approved was to basically turn the angle around. And so what you see is you get sort of the impact of she's hit the hood of the car. You don't see her hit the hood of the car, but you see her father's reaction as he realizes that his daughter has just died right in front of him. And they were talking about how weird, like he Dini was saying in some ways that shot was even more traumatizing than if we just shown her fall. So,
right.
But
wow.
Yeah, they were pretty strict because they were. It's amazing to see how much media mentalities have changed. But that was the 90s was still, cable was coming on as a force, but that was still dominated by the networks. And that conservatism of the networks, and so these cable offerings had to play. They're playing around the edges, but they're having to play carefully.
Yeah. This is still the era when MTV's got music on it.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
yes.
And before reality shows, when the world was great. You know what I'm saying? I have two more that I want to give honorable mentions to before we wrap in a few moments.
Okay.
And I know you have probably a couple more too. I want to give props to that football-headed young man, Hey Arnold. Gotta give some love to Hey Arnold. And my last one that I had an honorable mention for was Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Gotta
have that.
Yeah. That was a really fun one.
What's the rest of your honorables?
Okay, I'm just gonna throw out a few here. The Tick.
Yes.
Did you?
The
Tick.
I remember the Tick.
Yes. Was a sort of spoof on superheroes. He's really sort of like a modern day Don Quixote.
That's right.
Like half the time you can't tell if he is really a superhero or if he's just that delusional. That he's saving the world. Most of the time, his superpowers seem to be largely that he's oblivious to reality.
That's a great superpower to
have. There was another one on Fox Kids called Eek the Cat. Eek the Cat. He was a purple cat. It oftentimes one of the fun memories from this show was they oftentimes spoofed President Bill Clinton's cat Socks on the show, and Socks was sort of Socks was a very dumb cat, and Eek the cat would always try and save Socks, and it would usually end up in Socks being just fine and Eek getting, smashed or run over by a car or something. So,
yeah.
Also, I loved MC Hammer had a cartoon on ABC in the early 90s called Hammerman.
I wonder what it was called. I couldn't remember.
It was called Hammerman, and I loved it. I was a big MC Hammer fan.
Yeah, weren't we all? The parachute pants, man. Come on.
Yes, yeah. He had he would become Hammerman when he put on his magical he had a pair of magical suede shoes, and when he would put those on, he would turn into Hammerman.
And everyone picked on him about his parachute pants, like when he was really famous, and everyone's like, "Here's this strange guy in these big pants." And by the end of the decade, everyone's got Jenkos. It's like we all had our own style of parachute pants.
Yep, absolutely. The last one, I don't think you can do like this one. So perfectly blended the aesthetics and social concerns of the 90s with cartooning. I don't think you can do a 90s cartoon list and not mention Captain Planet.
Yes.
Captain Planet.
Yeah, how did we not say that? Wow. And again, our lists were totally different.
Yes, which is amazing. I was like you. I was afraid we were going to end up with similar lists.
Yeah. I'm like, there's no way that we're not going to overlap on one at least. And especially with mine, I'm like, well, everyone's going to remember, like SpongeBob or something like that. No. And this is the beauty. This is also the beauty about being historians, right? In that we could be talking about the same thing as far as the same genre, the same medium, whatever it may be. And we can have two different messages coming out of it. And when people are like, well, we've already heard enough about XYZ, it's like, but a historian can come along and like say, well, there's this other thing, there's other facet to this thing. And I think that's why I like doing this. It's like you get to see what each historian sees as either important to the era, or they like it just because it's quirky. I mean, we did the film set in the 1700s, and we're like, it doesn't have to be authentic. It's just, what's it mean to you?
Yeah.
You're going to get crazy stuff popping out of it. And here's another instance where what you see as top 3 is different than mine, but yet we can at least say, yeah, I understand why you would think that's top 3, and I think that's why it's really cool to do this kind of stuff. By the way, thank you everybody for voting. We got 3 votes. We're going to call it right now 100% in for Blake. Amazing.
Oh,
look at that. The guest takes it tonight. Thank God. It doesn't look like it's rigged. Last week, it kept going back 50-50. And I'm like, would someone else vote? Would someone else please vote? We can break this tie. I don't want to go into a runoff right now. But that's awesome. But Blake, it's great to have you on, man, again. And
yeah, dude.
Doing stuff. This is like the 3rd time we've worked together, and it's always a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, I love it. So do I get to come back for the 80s?
Hey,
I won't put you on the spot.
Hey. I mean, what you said is absolutely correct. The stuff that you perceived as 90s being late 80s, just like mine being 80s, and it was actually like late 70s. It's kind of like, wow, okay, yeah. We're definitely gonna do a top 3 80s cartoons, everybody, in case you're a little bit older and you were, you remember the stuff back in the 80s when the world was even more crazy because everyone was having white couches and looked like they were on Miami Vice. Well, except my people. Pennsylvanians did not look like that. I'm telling you right now. We'll go over that too. We should do like top 80s, like worst clothing options or something. That would be good. But yeah, we'll definitely do a top 3 80s cartoons to go off of this. And man, I'm really looking forward to the Batman book.
Thanks, dude.
And I love the Charlie Brown book, and I know that I have the link here on my site somewhere for the Charlie Brown book as well, so that people can pick that up, because it's a great way to support your work, and we're
Yeah.
really happy to have you back on again, man.
Thanks, dude. This is one of my favorites, man. I love it. I love it every time I get to come on here. You're a great host and a great guy, and I really enjoy getting to talk with you, buddy.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. I hope everybody in chat has a great night. Please be safe out there. Be kind to one another. Keep reading. And don't forget, if you're not already subscribed, go down below and hit that subscribe button so I know you're here, and hit that bell when you'll know when we go live and when I upload some videos, because there's going to be videos coming up here in the near future. Even though it's cold, I'm still going outside and videoing stuff. I don't know why. I hate the cold. But I will get you more content. Don't worry. Thank you again, everybody, for hanging out with Blake and I tonight. It really means a lot. Thank you for reminiscing in the chat as well, and being a part of it, and being so helpful with the poll questions. Take care, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you later.